This is a Euphyllia stony coral, commonly known as a hammer coral, named after the great 90s rapper, MC Hammer. Often referred to as an LPS, which stands for large polyp stony coral, as opposed to an SPS, which stands for small polyped stony coral. They're not an easy, but they're not a hard coral to keep. So they're okay for beginners, but do present a little bit of challenge. They're commonly placed in the middle of the reef, and they thrive with moderate light. These corals thrive under mostly blue light, which also helps to really bring out their colours, but try to limit the light to about 10 hours a day. Modern LEDs will give amazing results with these corals. The colour of the light and the parameters of the water will affect the coral's colour. Best to ensure you're getting at least 8 hours of darkness. This coral needs a lot of room, as it will send out sweeper tentacles at night to attack its neighbours, especially those downstream. They're best kept near similar Euphyllia style of corals, because hammers get along best with their own kind. Though unusual, it is possible they can sting fish. They require moderate water flow, but you don't want the pumps blowing straight at the coral, because it makes them very uncomfortable, like having a hose pointed right in your face. This coral doesn't really need feeding, as the fish waste is commonly adequate for this species, but they sure do enjoy spot feeding, and spot feeding is very important if you don't have many fish in the tank. Feeding them will help them to grow, and that will be evident by a white skeleton at the top of the coral when it's closed, which will signify growth on the coral. As with all corals, if they're not growing, they're dying. And don't be tempted to eat this coral, even if it does remind you of jelly. It's best to handle the coral with gloves, because it may irritate your skin. It's not uncommon for this coral to develop brown jelly disease, particularly if placed in a spot that lacks water flow. Pre-quarantining corals where possible is a good little bit of security for you. When you position the coral in the tank, allow it 3 weeks to settle in before you judge how well it's opening up and how happy it is. It is important to know what the coral should look like when open, and consider moving it after 3 weeks if you get a bad feeling about where you've put it. If this coral was to die, it's a good idea to remove the skeleton out of the tank. Then you could clean it all up and later use it as live rock. But be careful not to remove it unless you know it is dead, because I've seen this coral bounce back when I never believed it would have made it. It is great to have a quarantine tank, because if you do get a coral you're concerned about, you can put it in the quarantine tank and not risk any further infections to your other corals. If you do need to handle this coral, you want to handle the hard skeleton base and ensure you turn it upside down when you remove it. It's got very large tentacles and the skeletal structure of it is very sharp, so you could actually damage it, so pick it up upside down. You should refrain from touching the tissue with your fingers, as the oils on your hand may kill it. And as MC Hammer says, you can't touch this. The coral will retract into their shell at night. I guess it's the opposite to MC Hammer. I would assume he used to go out a lot at night. Clownfish will often host in the coral, which is fun for the clownfish, but it may stress and even kill the coral.